On the afternoon of March 5th, 2022, a seemingly typical severe weather setup in the upper Midwest would produce a swath of tornadoes across the state of Iowa. One of these tornadoes would go down in history as it left behind a 70-mile path of destruction. This is the true story of the 2022 Winterset Tornado. The state of Iowa is no stranger to severe weather and tornadoes. Sitting on the edge of Tornado Alley, the state receives about 48 tornadoes per year. However, in March of 2022, one of these tornadoes would be particularly devastating to those caught in its path. Our story begins over the Great Plains. A 500 millibar trough is approaching from the west and begins to cross into the central United States. As this trough dives over the Rocky Mountains, it begins to form a surface low-pressure system in a process known as Lee cyclogenesis. This surface low-pressure system begins to draw in seasonably warm and moist air from the Gulf of Mexico underneath an area of extremely cold air aloft, as winds just above the surface begin to blow more intensely to the north. This modestly warm air under the exceptionally cold air aloft is generating strong atmospheric instability very close to the ground in what is known as a cold core severe weather setup. These atmospheric conditions are creating an environment that is conducive to the formation of rotating thunderstorms called supercells, and by the morning of the 5th, the meteorologists at the Storm Prediction Center took note, issuing an enhanced risk for severe weather, including a slight risk for a few weaker tornadoes. Looking back, this was woefully short of what was needed. By 3 p.m., a cluster of thunderstorms initiated in southwest Iowa and began to slowly organize as they traveled northeast. As this cluster marched forward, one of these storms became dominant and developed into a strong supercell, putting down a few brief, weak tornadoes as it slowly closed the distance to the town of Winterset. Following closely behind, storm chaser Chris Risky gained a visual on the storm. What do you remember about March 5th, 2022?
I remember it was going to be a tornado day in Iowa, and I drove all the way out from Denver. Made the trip. It was freezing cold. Barely got any sleep that night. Ended up making it to the target area kind of early. But I just kind of had this feeling something was going to happen that day. Couldn't, get any more sleep. Ended up starting the chase in Atlantic, Iowa, which is about 20 miles west of Winterset. Played around with some storms. But then it became pretty obvious one storm was dominating the atmosphere, and I booked it east to get in front of that storm, to get a view of the updraft base, which is where the tornadoes occur. And sure enough, about 10 seconds after I hit record, the storm formed a very powerful tornado.
Oh, we got a tornado. We have a tornado.
The tornado began at 5:26 p.m. Central Standard Time just north of the town of Marksburg and appeared as a thin, wispy condensation funnel before beginning to rapidly expand in width. The tornado moved through a rural forested area, impacting few, if any, structures before beginning to rapidly strengthen as it approached the southern edge of Winterset, exhibiting strong, multiple vortex structure and horizontal vortices, all signs of an intensifying tornado. Entering into the southern outskirts of Winterset, the tornado would reach its peak strength as it impacted several structures at EF4 intensity, damaging or completely sweeping away several homes and sadly killing 6 people, 4 of which came from a single family, all perishing in the same house. The tragic moment caught on camera as debris of the homes orbit the funnel.
Oh my god, this thing is tossing debris.
The twister weakened slightly as it continued to the northeast, narrowly missing downtown Winterset by less than a mile as it traveled into a more rural area. The tornado continued through this mostly rural area for the next 15 miles before entering into the southern fringes of the Des Moines metro area. The tornado then impacted the southern edge of the suburb of Norwalk at EF2 intensity, causing severe structural damage to several structures and tearing down power lines. The tornado continued to inflict EF2 damage as it crossed US Highway 65 and impacted the small community of Woodland Hills, tearing the roofs off of several homes and causing some structural damage. Crossing once again into a more rural area, the tornado continued to inflict EF2 damage to several barns, rural houses, and power lines as it narrowly missed the small town of Colfax. After crossing Interstate 80, the tornado began to weaken as it passed to the north of Newton before finally dissipating at 7:01 p.m. The tornado was on the ground for over an hour and a half and traveled for more than 70 miles, taking the lives of 6 and injuring 5. The parent supercell continued to the northeast and quickly cycled, producing a couple EF2 tornadoes, which remained in rural areas, downing trees and causing moderate damage to barns and outbuildings, before cycling again and producing its final tornado, which impacted the town of Vinton, causing light damage to some industrial buildings. Farther to the south, another pair of supercells would produce an additional 6 tornadoes, including 2 EF2s and an EF3, which sadly claimed one more life before this day would finally end. By the morning of March 6th, 7 people had lost their lives from a series of 12 tornadoes across the state of Iowa, the vast majority of which were caused by the Winterset Tornado alone. The tornado was on the ground for over an hour and a half and traveled for 70 miles, making it the longest track tornado of the outbreak and the longest track tornado to hit Iowa in nearly a decade. Winterset was also the deadliest tornado to strike Iowa since the Parkersburg EF5 that occurred on May 25, 2008, and remarkably was also the farthest north violent tornado ever to occur so early in the season. While Winterset is not the most destructive or impactful tornado I've covered on this channel, the Winterset event is particularly fascinating to me. To have such a significant tornado occur on a day when the atmospheric conditions did not seem to support it seems to defy our understanding of meteorology, and makes it that much more interesting to study. How such a violent tornado came out of a setup that at face value seems so typical for the early season is still somewhat of a mystery. However, there are a few possible explanations. The air near the ground on March 5th contained a large amount of instability in the lowest 3 kilometers of the atmosphere, called 3 Cape in the meteorology world. High values of 3 Cape can cause storms to rapidly tilt and stretch spinning air in the surrounding environment into the vertical and aid in the tornadogenesis process. Typically, values over 50 joules per kilogram support tornado formation. On the day the Winterset tornado occurred, this value was over 120. In addition to the high values of 3 Cape, the low-level hodographs near Winterset may have been greatly expanded compared to what was forecast by the models. These enlarged hodographs resulted in much more low-level shear and spin called helicity being available for the parent supercell, and as a result, long-lived, violent tornadoes may have become possible. Why the Winterset tornado was as powerful as it was may remain a mystery to us. However, trying to understand these fringe events will bring us ever closer to understanding these fascinating and often incredible forces of nature.